Most managers think working 12-hour days is just part of the job. But what if I told you those 12 to 15-hour days aren't actually a leadership requirement, and that there is a version of leadership where you can lead a strong team without sacrificing your evenings, your weekends, and your sanity in the process? Yep, I'm telling the truth. And that's why in this video, I'm gonna show you what's really behind those endless hours that you're working and how you can finally break free as early as this week, because I want nothing more than for you to truly step into leadership and stop feeling like your whole life is being taken over by your job. So first, let's talk about one of the biggest mistakes that keeps managers trapped and overwhelmed. And for that, I actually want to introduce you to my friend, Firefighting Fiona. And if you've been on this channel before, then you already know who she is. But for those of you that are new around here, let me catch you up real quick. Firefighting Fiona is a new manager who's been in her role for about a year. She has great intentions, but she always ends her day exhausted, and she often wonders where all her time went. You see, she's the type of person that typically spends her day solving everybody else's fires, hence the name Firefighting Fiona. So let's walk through a typical day for Fiona, okay? So picture this. So it's 8:15 in the morning, and she sits down with her coffee, she opens up her laptop, and she tells herself, with those good intentions, okay, today's the day I'm finally gonna focus on that quarterly report that my boss asked for. And so she gets started on it. But then like 15 minutes into working on it, one of her team members, Katrina, pings her on Teams and says, hey, Fiona, I really need your help. I've got a client over here that is so upset about the proposal that we sent over. How do you want me to respond to this? So what does Fiona do? Well, she jumps into the email thread herself. She rewrites the response because honestly, it's just faster for her to do it. She's done it before, so she jumps right in. Then she sits back down at her computer, and 20 minutes later, she gets a knock on the door by Sam. And Sam says, I'm stuck on this inventory tracker. I can't figure out why the numbers aren't matching. So what does she do? Well, she says, sure, let me take a look at that for you. And then she ends up fixing the problem herself. And then on and on the interruptions go until it's suddenly 5:30 p.m. Her team has gone home and she still hasn't finished the report that she intended to do. Can you spot the issue with how Fiona approached her day? Well, I'm sure you can see that in every situation, Fiona defaulted to solving and doing, right? She jumped in to do the client email. She fixed the tracking issue with Sam. She essentially closed all the loops for everybody, which left her sitting with her own open loop late at night. Now, of course, as you know, this is not an uncommon story. In fact, I think the reason why you're watching this video today is because this has probably happened to you more than a few times. So let's talk about what's driving that behavior, because I believe it's going to bring you some awareness so that you can start shifting your defaults. So what's the issue? Well, the issue in Fiona's approach is actually her identity. She's still identifying as an IC, which has her thinking and acting like an individual contributor. And when you think about it, it actually makes perfect sense. I mean, let's say Fiona has worked in the workforce for maybe like 10 years. And 9 of those years were spent as an individual contributor. What habits over the years would have been rewarded and reinforced? Well, most likely it would have been habits like solving problems quickly, being dependable, fixing mistakes, moving fast, right? Producing high quality work herself, catching issues before anybody else does, and stepping in when things go wrong. That's probably what made her really successful. So it's no wonder why her brain learned, well, if I do it myself, it gets done right. Because for 9 years, that's what worked. In fact, that's what got her promoted to management. But here's the problem. In the seat of a manager, that mindset actually creates a vicious cycle. You see, her personal high standards that was created as an IC brought to life the belief that only she can hit those standards. And so as a result, her brain stopped even considering alternatives, which made her adopt the posture of a fixer, which led to 12-hour days being normal. Crazy how that happens, right? Now, I want to be clear. It is not the high standards that are the problem. In fact, having high standards is a great thing. The problem is the identity, right? What you think your role is in meeting those standards. That's what's creating the overwhelm. That's what's creating the long hours, right? This belief that in order to hit 100%, it has to be done by you. So what's the adjustment that we need to make? Because clearly we need to adjust something if we want different results. We need to adjust our thinking, right? And recognize that the role of of a manager is not to do the work yourself, but to create outcomes through the team. Now, how do you do that? Well, one of the ways that you can do that is through delegation. Now, depending on where you are in your journey, you might be sitting there thinking to yourself, oh, Max, seriously, I do delegate from time to time. But the problem is when I delegate, it doesn't work out, which is why I end up doing it myself. To which I'll say this, I'm honestly genuinely glad that you're trying. I think that's an important first step. And I'm really so happy that you've recognized the importance of it, because a lot of people don't. And so I know that the fact that you're trying and it's not working is probably really frustrating. So let's talk about why it might not be working out for you like you want it to yet. One of the things that I've observed that has caused a lot of friction with delegation is managers letting the measuring stick for what good looks like live in their head. So what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that sometimes we hand tasks off, but we never actually communicate, for example, what success looks like, what matters most, what done correctly means, or what quality standard we're actually measuring against. And so what happens? Well, naturally, work's going to end up coming back to you incomplete. And then, of course, you get frustrated, you end up redoing it yourself, and that reinforces the belief that if I want it done right, I got to do it myself. And that is honestly a frustrating place to be, because then you end up in a situation where you're doing two jobs, right? Two jobs, yours and everybody else's. What I want to do is challenge you to not stop at the frustration and taking it back. I want you to instead take inventory of how you're actually handing off the work. So audit your delegation. Ask yourself, am I clearly communicating the outcome I want? Am I defining what done actually looks like? Am I confirming understanding instead of assuming it? Am I setting very clear timelines and ownership? And this one, am I using active, direct language in my ask? Asking these questions will give you a lot of information about how effective your delegation is. And if it is missing any of those components, then I'm sorry to say it, but it's no wonder why you're feeling frustrated and overloaded. It's because you're starting from a place that has gaps in it. The truth is, your team cannot consistently hit a standard that they can't see. You have to clearly articulate it. And listen, if this is something that has been hard for you to do, I don't want you to beat yourself up about it, because it's actually not something most of us just naturally know how to do. It's something you have to learn, because there are so many components of it, right? It's not just the what you're saying, it's also how you're saying what you're saying. And that's why we work through this kind of thing together in my program, the New Manager Accelerator program, where I give my clients training, tools, and resources to be able to do this well. That's why my client Lauren was able to say this after going through the program.
The one that stands out to me is the delegation framework. So I used that the week that I was taking that module. I had a big project that I had put on my own plate. I said, I will handle this. I will gatekeep it. It's my entire project. Like, I wanted the ownership of it. And
Yeah.
listening to the delegation module, I was sitting there being like, no, I've got team members that can do this.
Hmm.
And I had a different colleague who challenged me to challenge the rest of our team members, because they were at kind of a transition period of like, okay, you've been with us for a while. We need you to level up so that we can bring in people under you or
Right.
make some decisions. And so my colleague challenged me and said, hey, you don't need to do this. Have them do this. And so I used the delegation framework to organize my thoughts, to organize what this project looks like and how it's going to flow, what the timeline is. And then I shared it with my team. I did it two different times. So one part of the project went to a different team, and another part of the project went to a different team. And so I did the delegation conversation twice. And the team that I gave part of the project to, they'd been on my team for a while, and one of them said that when I asked about feedback, what pushback might happen with this project, what questions do you have, and whatever, his response was, I actually wrote it down. Let's see. His response was that this was the first effective organized delegation. So I was like, okay, I've delegated plenty before, but this was the first effective organized one. And it did go
Yeah.
well. And that's when I felt that, like, okay, these frameworks are super helpful, and it really helps me more than anything kind of organize my thoughts. And I'm going to use it later today.
So good, right? I love that she got that feedback from her team. It made me so proud of her, especially since it was something that she had been struggling with for quite some time. And actually, if you want to watch the rest of Lauren's interview and hear how she was able to overcome her long hours and what made her decide to join us in NMA, I'm actually going to link that video below for you to watch. You know, the truth is, in order to finally stop working these long hours, you have to start rewiring where you see your value. You know, you are not valuable as the person who does everything yourself or solves every problem. Your true value is being the person who builds the capacity in others through things like strong delegation, right? So that you can achieve those outstanding results. So, my friend, if you are ready to stop carrying your entire team on your back and finally become the kind of leader who creates results without sacrificing your evenings, your weekends, and your sanity, I would love to support you inside the New Manager Accelerator program. I'm going to put all the details for it in the description box below, and I genuinely hope to see you there. In fact, if you just want to book a call with me to figure out if this is the program for you, like if it's going to meet your needs and goals, then I'm also going to leave the link to my calendar in the description box below so that you can book a free call to figure out if it's the right fit for where you at. I'd be so happy to talk to you and we can just figure that out together.